everyone to our old tradition, Remarkable People. This old popular program was established to deepen our sense of community. Speakers share with us whatever they wish about their life and beliefs to help us know and understand them better. The good old days of refreshments and face-to-face questions in the fireside room are still out of reach, but we are proud to have continued the tradition through the pandemic. This is our 10th Zoom meeting. Many thanks to Carol Kerr and Kim Holscher for publicity and for recording. We do allow time for questions. If you do have a question, please just put your name in the chat box and I will call on you. And now, Wendy Meluch.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm happy and excited to be here. Am I unmuted? Yeah. Okay. I don't often pause to think about myself in these terms, so it's actually been really fun and pleasant. And I am an extrovert, as some of you know very well, but even for this extrovert me, it seems very me-ish. And so I actually have some pictures to share with you of remarkable people that I have found along the way to help me tell stories of remarkable things that have happened. So I'm going to share screen, and I think what's going to happen is you will see my images and then you'll see a small me in like a thumbnail sort of thing. And then when I'll stop sharing screen a little bit later. So I'm going to, all right, so do you see my lovely parents in their wedding attire? And you should see me, and depending on how you have your screen set up, you might see other people as well. So these are remarkable people. My parents got married over 70 years ago. This picture was taken 70 years and 2 months ago, almost exactly. They're both still living there in Arizona in assisted living, and very glad that they are allowed to go to the dining room again. So I was the last of 4 kids. My brother was the one taking the picture. So this is me on my dad's back. And as I pulled together a few pictures and as I thought about life, I realized there are a few themes that are really dominant and have really been compelling to me. And so obviously family is bigger than anything, and I know a lot of us feel that way. I grew up traveling. You can see here I was traveling and hiking before I could even walk. And in fact, so family and travel are 2 of the themes that come up over and over again. And also dance. And in fact, when my parents were younger, they were very big square dancers. And my mom had a whole wardrobe of those puffy skirts. I later became a square dancer. But when I was a little bit bigger than in this picture, I was on my dad's shoulders as they were doing their complicated dance. And my mom had her poofy skirts and everything. So again, I'm the youngest. Right down here, my brother in red is still a big dork. He's also a surgeon in Indiana who is in the process of retiring. My sister Lisa is a wound care nurse. She's quite an expert. She's in outside of Denver. My sister Kim ended up to be the most beautiful woman. Braces really did her a lot in middle school. She's one of the most remarkable people I know. She is raising a son with autism and has a tough row to hoe. She's got the biggest heart. I learn more from parents of kids with disabilities, I think, in terms of compassion than from anyone else. And of course, I'm the cutest. That goes without saying. And then still, when I meet my parents' friends, I tell them, I explain that I'm the favorite daughter. So I shared some, so other themes that I have a lot of are museums and archaeology, and those are related. The archaeology is related to the travel and anthropology are related to my undergrad work, and museums, and these are themes that have really been dominant for me and very compelling. So if you read the little newsletter squib, Carol picked up on the fact that I crossed the Arctic Circle in 1965. So this is the summer of the year I turned 5 later. And we drove from Chicago to Alaska. We took a plane from Nome to Kotzebue, and this photograph is taken on the beach of Kotzebue with the local people who lent us warm coats, even though it was the middle of summer. I do have a collection of Alaskan yo-yos that started on that trip, and that when I was traveling there for work really grew. And this slide sort of also stands in for other travel. My parents were world travelers. They were born to world travelers. My grandparents were in swimming with the king of Siam in a swimming pool full of gardenias in what, like the 20s or 30s. And they were riding camels in front of the pyramids back then. They were big travelers before it was a common thing. And so my parents grew up with that, and they instilled that in us. And so as a child, we traveled to the Southwest many times, did the river rafting in the Grand Canyon. In '68, I was the youngest person ever to be on a raft trip in the Grand Canyon. It was a 10-day trip in, it must have been in '69 because I was 8 years old. And we were finding archaeological sites that hadn't been recorded yet. Very few tourists had yet been down the canyon. We, in fact, drank the river water. We were given a plastic cup at the beginning of the 10 days, and every hour or so, the boatman would say, get a scoop of water, hold your water up, let the silt settle down, and then drink it. And now, if any of you have done that trip in the Grand Canyon, you cannot do that. There's too many people. You actually have to carry water and carry a porta potty. So it was a pretty exciting adventure. Being the youngest, when my parents started doing big travel, they felt bad leaving me home all the time. So during high school, I got to go to Easter Island, where I celebrated my 15th birthday. I also traveled with them in Patagonia, where in '75 in Pinochet's Argentina, we stood in our hotel room and we watched at midnight the streets were empty because there was a national curfew, and every street corner had armed guards. It was freakish. I have reminded my dad of this recently in my campaign to change his vote in November. I think, let's see. And I also got to travel with them in India. On sort of an exchange with medical professionals that was very eye-opening. There was one evening event where a gentleman who was a host from the local medical school came and said, you're way too young. And he got permission from my parents, and I went with him and his driver to where his young daughters and cousins were hanging out. And so they thought I was beautiful, and I thought they were beautiful, and somebody was translating for us, and then we played music and showed each other how we dance. It was awkward and wonderful. And so that was high school in India. All of that shaped a lot of my academic and personal pursuits. And during high school, I spent 2 summers in archaeology school, which was run by Northwestern University in Southern Illinois. And this man was a bona fide remarkable person, a Cherokee and Scottish fellow and educator. And he would work with youths to build like a Scottish village or a Cherokee. And he actually had expertise in Pawnee tradition. So this lower image here, I know we've got a very well-traveled bunch at UUCM. The Field Museum in Chicago is home to this huge Pawnee Lodge, and this was a project that John White worked on. When I studied with him in high school, in field school, we were doing archaeology, like hardcore archaeology, but also cultural studies. So we built a structure sort of like that with the willow frame, bent willow frame. We harvested the willows to bend. We harvested the daub, which is mud, wattle and daub. So we were using bark strips and mud that we collected from the riverbank. It was intense and wonderful. And this man taught us songs. He woke us up with Native American songs. It was fabulous. He was a remarkable storyteller and a great educator, and a big reason why when I went to undergrad, I studied anthropology, even though my field work was archaeology. I also studied travel and tourism management in the form of a business degree. And I got a certificate of Latin American studies and was fluent in Spanish, and all that came together. My first job out of college was actually in educational travel in Mexico. Mm-hmm. Another big part of my family and my growing up was church. I grew up in the Presbyterian church, so I know which fork to use when the table is set. I was a pretty serious, I mean, I've always been goofy, but I've always had a serious thread. And I actually spent a lot of time in the library here at this church. And I think people really thought I might end up in seminary. We had a bigger than life minister who came out of retirement to marry me and Ray years later, named Dr. Tallman. And I made an appointment with him when I was in, I don't know, middle school. I understood the Lord, the Son, but the Holy Ghost thing, I couldn't understand the Holy Ghost. And so I made a date with the eminence guy, the gray eminence of our world at church. And he could not bring me to understand the Holy Ghost thing. And about the same time, I was driving, actually not far from this part of my hometown, with my dad, and we drove by the Catholic high school, which was called IC, which stood for Immaculate Conception. Now I understand that Immaculate Conception means you're free of sin so you can conceive the child of the Lord. But at the time, we mistook that for virgin birth. Well, I was in the car with my dad, the obstetrician, and I questioned him about this, and he said, well, you know, we Presbyterians, we don't make that big of a deal out of that part, that virgin birth thing. And what he never could have realized the door that he opened up for me. If we can question that, then I'm going to call a lot of other things into question. So, but this was where, you know, my youth group from really tiny grade school through high school. The high school was kitty corner from our church. Our youth group was really strong, really active. We had 3 full-time ministers, including a youth minister, who later got busted for bad behavior with choir ladies at a different church. But while he was with us, apparently he behaved well enough, and that was, I'm still in touch with quite a number of those people. And they're all quite gaudy, which I guess shouldn't surprise me. But they are communicative and holding it together. So that's kind of my childhood and growing up. I got you through high school. Just to up to date you on what my parents look like now. They're in their 90s. They are really important to me, even though there are a lot of things we don't agree on. They're in assisted living in Tucson, and my sister Kim is the one I mentioned earlier, who's also raising a young man with autism. She does double duty, taking care of my folks as well. I miss them. So then I went to college, where I met this guy who may or may not look familiar to you. During school, I spent a quarter in Mexico. It was a winter quarter. February, I was in Mexico on the beach, and I looked at the palm trees, and I thought, you know, I could finish school and live where palm trees can survive. Because I remember I was in school at Michigan State, where the weather wants to kill you 8 months of the year. So I went back to Michigan State after being in Mexico, ostensibly to study. A little while later, I met this guy who liked the idea of living where palm trees can survive. So we landed in LA, where we lived for 365 days. It really didn't suit us, and we were happy to switch to Northern California. What brought us out here was a remarkable woman I don't have a picture of, named Kate Boucher. She had an educational travel, well, she's one of the things that brought us out that related to educational travel in Latin America. And we have traveled with her in Mayalandia, where she was a site photographer when her dad was an archaeologist, and just really, really compelling, motivating person. And a lot of the reason why we ended up in Northern California, so we'll always appreciate that. Some of you know I have a dance background, and you may or may not recognize my partner here. So and you guys are old enough to remember with me, living through 1984 and 1985. And I remember the first time I made a date on my calendar for 1985, and I thought, oh, we're gonna make it. We're gonna survive 1984. And I then took my first belly dance class on the Ides of March in 1985, and the rest is history. And a couple of years, I can't remember exactly what year this was, but a couple of years into my dance career, there was a talent show at Dolby where Ray has worked for like 35 years. And so, but to be in the talent show, Ray had to be on the stage. So we dressed him up so he could be on stage. So he walked out on stage and put a cushion down and sat down on the cushion, and then he put like that for the dancing girl to start. And that's how I was able to do the Dolby talent show. So I danced and taught and coached actively for about 25 years. And there are many, many lessons that come with belly dancing. One of the ones that's easiest to share in polite company is the idea that when people are watching a live performance, they can sometimes forget that it's live, and there's an energy exchange happening between the performer and the audience member. But if you're not accustomed to that and you're in the audience, you're used to looking at a screen, many people. So they don't realize I can see them. And I had a regular gig at a Middle Eastern restaurant in the East Bay. And one night I was dancing my little heart out. And it was common that I could read the dynamics of the people in the audience, like who's on a date, who's on a business dinner, right? And one night there was a couple, and the young man was really enjoying my show, and the young woman was sitting a little behind him so he couldn't see her, and she was just shooting daggers at me. And part of my job at that gig was to, in between sets, put on a beautiful robe and come schmooze the audience. And so when I did that, this woman who was clearly on a date, not feeling very secure, right, about her date, because I was apparently threatening, when I came out and she was now visible to her date interacting with me, wasn't she so appreciative? And didn't she just love it? And wasn't she looking forward to the next act? But I knew that wasn't true. She had revealed herself to me, but she didn't realize that because we're so used to dealing with screens. It's one of the many really visceral lessons I got out of that. This is a remarkable woman. Late in my dance career, she and I became dance partners. I never thought I would find somebody with as big of a stage personality as I have. She's really quick study, good choreographer, fabulous sense. I learned a lot from her, not just in terms of dance and performance, but in making choices. And how those choices affect what you can step up to and how to relate to each other. I chose to have children. She didn't choose to have children. And when I would be like too busy to take care of a costuming thing because of taking care of kids, she'd be, that was the choice you made. And I don't want to make it sound harsh. It was just a really good touchstone. I'm still in touch with her. She's one of the few people I see during this COVID carefulness. We often are together on the back porch in the breeze. Everyone needs to have a friend like Evelyn. So after I became a dancer, then we got married in 1987. And so we had our anniversary in April, which we celebrated, as you can see here. Forrest helped us take those pictures. And the rest is history. You know some of these folks. Our daughter B was born in 95, and her little brother Forrest was born in 99, and he had laryngomalacia. So after we figured out why he would occasionally stop breathing and turn blue, we knew how to take care of him until he outgrew the condition. So we had him at home on oxygen. As you can see, his little cannula. He also had an apnea monitor wrapped around his chest. And so he was in a bed next to, in a crib that opened to my bed, so he could be near me, even though he had all the wires and tubes. And at about 6.5 or 7 months, we did this O2 sat test, and we could take him off the oxygen. And then we all understood that it was time to wean mommy off of the apnea monitor. So we were in the process of weaning mommy off of the apnea monitor when he started rolling over in bed. And you know what that means. You can no longer have the wires and such. Now it's probably remote, but at the time it was wires. So we could no longer have him with wires in his crib since he was rolling over. And so we went cold turkey, and he was fine. And at 10 months old, he got declared normal. Yay, sometimes normal is all you want. And you would never know. Look at him now. Our daughter B is currently in Memphis with her boyfriend and working an interesting lab job. I could go on about them for a whole nother day. Just like the church I grew up in is really a stand-in for people, this is a stand-in for people, and including all of you. When our kids were little, we wanted to raise them in a community of like-minded folks, because these lessons need to come from more than just mommy and daddy. And we knew we could never go back to the Catholic church my husband grew up in. We could never go back to the Presbyterian church I grew up in for oh so many reasons. We're just not, well, I just don't lean towards Christianity. I know we've all been there. So the people here, I'm going to run the risk of naming a few people, knowing that I'm going to not be able to name all of them. But there are a few families that have really been important for us over the years, really consistently. When the kids were really little and we met the songsters, B and Jeremy Songster were like this. Jeremy went home and told his mom he had met his soulmate. And so there were a couple summers there where the Songster kids and our kids just grew up like cousins. We were together every day in the summer. It was so rich and wonderful. We've had wonderful adventures with Lynn and Nancy's crew, the Thurmans and Susie Musgrove. That passel of kids with our kids grew up like cousins for many years. We did all holidays together. We're still in touch with the Thurmans who live in Santa Rosa, although they no longer participate at UCM. And of course, we're still in touch with Susie and Julia. I want to mention one other person, although there are myriad people I could, and that is Linda Howman. Linda Howman let me have free reign in Sunday school several years ago. I taught a bunch of years when the kids were little, and there was one year where she pretty much just let me do whatever. So we did a whole unit on the origins of life and the Big Bang theory. And it was so fun. On the last, because we had been building up, and on the last session, I had this big pot of water, and I'd been labeling building blocks with the building blocks of life, like the early first elements, and we were throwing them in there, and we were doing lightning, because all those things needed some kind of electric charge. So I had lightning bolts, and I was wearing a lab coat, and I had my hair all frizzed out. We had so much fun. I just adore Linda for letting me play with everybody's kids. There have been 2 times when, in a nightmare, who has shown up to help me and my family? It's been Linda Howman. So, and I feel friendships like that with a lot of people at UUCM, and the newest remarkable people that I'm engaging with now at UUCM is the WA committee, because I have just joined up as a WA, and I'm really thrilled to be working with these thoughtful, amazing people. So a really big part of my life has been my career. I'm really lucky that the work I do always plays out Unitarian Universalist ideals and goals and principles. And this woman is based in Chicago. Beverly Sorrell is one of the biggest names in museum evaluation and exhibit development. And she really helped kickstart my career when I finished graduate school. I had read everything she ever wrote. And I begged an audience with her in Chicago once when I was visiting my folks when they still lived back there. And she was gruff, but it turned out friendly, and it was really great. And she's like, "Oh, you're in California. There's a gig up in Alaska I don't have time for. Call this guy." I was right out of grad school. I called this guy, and it was my first really big deal contract. And it was in Alaska at the Pratt Museum in Homer, where I ended up working a lot between 98 and 04, 06, and then again a couple times after that. So I was going up there several times a year. Hence the Alaskan yo-yo collection growing. And that is sort of a stand-in, well, an introduction to, and I'm going to try and pick up the pace here. The museum work I've been able to do has brought me in touch with so many remarkable people in different corners of the earth with different talents, and people that need this open-ended world where they can express themselves. And I've had the pleasure of working with people like this guy, Moses, at the Bishop Museum in Honolulu. He's an educator there. He is engaging, brilliant, compelling. And I get to help assess and improve the projects that museums develop for students for learning like this. It is such a thrill and such an honor. So my Alaska work was all cultural and history. My Honolulu work is usually a cultural science blend. So this project was making science content accessible to kids with Polynesian heritage. So we had units on navigation with birds, navigation with stars, navigation with, how did you create the different kinds of canoes? So it's this blend of culture and STEM. It's so beautiful. It's such an honor to be a part of those things. I thought this picture was pretty funny. This is a guy you got to be careful when you pose with him, because I like to tend to point at the person I'm posing with, and the keeper is like, you don't want to be wagging your finger at this guy. This is sort of a stand-in. I've also really enjoyed doing projects at zoos, and zoos is another place where you blend the science and the experience and it's the visitor experience of learning and engaging. And I've done projects at the San Francisco Zoo and the Oakland Zoo and the Junior Museum and Zoo in Palo Alto, which is rebuilding right now. Some of the best work I've ever done was with them, focus groups with families of children with disabilities. There's a huge range of experiences. I think you recognize the guy on the left. Easy to sign up for a project where they're talking about science. We're talking about how art and science are the same thing, how art helps you understand science, how natural history and art naturally blend. So easy to want to join on to a project like that. So in 2014, when I was contacted by the Cody Firearms Museum, I really hesitated. I had to ask myself, part of the reason I love my work as a qualitative researcher primarily is I get to wallow in the data. I get to think about the data. I get to think about people's perspectives on how art and science are the same thing or not. So did I want to do that with firearms? And it was a competitive situation. I was thrilled to be selected, and I decided I really wanted to pit myself against that and stand up to it and be a professional and be useful. And ultimately it was a really good experience. They were getting ready to reinstall the entire Cody Firearms Museum. And this guy here took me out to go shooting, because I had never been shooting really. And when I asked them after my first week in town, can somebody take me shooting? They were all over the moon, because here they had hired this liberal tree hugger from San Francisco. And I'm asking them to take me shooting. They were in heaven. So on the second trip I went out, and they took me out to the middle of nowhere, BLM land. This guy is a total expert, big collector. And I was there with the curator, who's a young woman, the only female curator of a firearms collection. Just more remarkable people everywhere you turn. But he had me shooting 5 small guns and 5 long guns from historic to modern. So I shot the same kind of gun that Abe Lincoln had and stuff like that. And I'm not a gun person. They scare me. I'm a city girl. But that was a really rarefied, fantastic experience. And it left me feeling both more and less afraid of guns. And then I had gotten a pretty good reputation. I ended up, on the left is the costume I used for, well, let me start on the TEDx. You guys, you're familiar with TEDx. In 2014, I did a TEDx about visitor studies and how we study your experience in museums to make museums better. And then about the same time, I did Western Museum Association, that I used to be very active with, had their own version of TED Talks. And so I did one that you see here while I was comparing my consulting career with my belly dance career and how they related to each other in terms of starting and growing and then reaching priestesshood. I'm trying to speed it up here. So then with a little bit higher reputation and still not a collapse of this nonprofit field, I then got the attention of this man here who was with a group of students from India in Oakland at the Chabot Space and Science Center, where I've done a ton of work, and they had an exchange thing that's fascinating, but I won't give you that detail. they invited me to come that summer in 2016 to work with these graduate students. And I also worked with museum professionals for a 2-day workshop. But I had 2 weeks with these students. And I'll tell you the really remarkable ones right there in the middle. These young women were so excited to have a woman come do the workshop and connect with me on the side. And it was so thrilling to represent a strong, professional, successful woman coming from overseas to share with them and to be interested in them and to ask them questions and to be supportive of them. So it was very cool. Remarkable people for sure. I've had a little bit of correspondence with a couple of those women since. And then here are the remarkable people with I still am doing some museum consulting, but I'm full-time at the YMCA of San Francisco, and these are really remarkable people. I just had a meeting with about half of this group. We trained them up to teach STEAM, and so we had a reflection session recently, and whenever I get to overlap with the young people at the Y that are actually presenting program, I'm very inspired. They come from the community we serve. One of these women has a math degree from the Philippines, and now she's trying to make it in the US and being an educator and inspiring these young kids that look like them. They're so energetic. They're so committed to support the communities they came out of. I mean, there are a lot of arguments with any big nonprofit, right? Like I can see the sausage getting made. It's not fun, but what happens out at the front lines is really important. And so these people inspire me and my work supports them. I'm not a frontline kind of gal and not in this community. I'm too old, I'm too white, but I support them from behind with the evaluation research that I do. So I'm surrounded by remarkable people that enable me to do remarkable things and have fun stories. And there are a million things I wish I could have told you, but I feel like I've gone over. Is that good timing, Nani?
Yes, it's
okay.
Perfect timing.
Okay.
Thank you very, very much. You took us on many trips, which we greatly enjoyed. And we now have time for questions, and I have a long list. Are these the people that wanted to speak? Yeah, I have names here. I guess they are from the chat box. Is that right, Kim?
I haven't been monitoring the chat, but you go right ahead and ask.
Okay, so how about Anne? Is there an Anne without a last name?
If you read the question, if there is one, you can go ahead and do that.
Okay, let's see what I have here. Okay, Carol. Is Carol here? Carol, let's see. I'm looking at the
When I
chat.
click on chat, it seems
Jim Harrison. Jim is here. Did you have a question? No.
No. Okay. There is Anne.
Yeah. I have a list.
Jim or Jim.
Now, everybody seems to be muted. Most people seem to be muted here.
I see some folks raising hands.
Oh, okay.
Carol is here.
We'll go back to the raised hand.
I saw Carol.
Carol, where is she?
She was here a minute ago.
Oh, there she is.
I think Jim has something.
I see Carol. And
I'm here, but I didn't have a question.
Okay, Jim Harrison, did you have a question?
Jim
Oh.
Kokoska does, so.
Let's see, Kathy Curtis.
Jim Prochaska.
Yes, Jim.
Hi, Jim.
I just want to say, incredibly articulate presentation. And having grown up in a Presbyterian church with a lot of youth, how do you think we could do that more at UU? Because it was such an important part of our, early years and teenage years.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot. That's a tough one. And because the census kind of ebbs and flows, And I know that we don't get a lot of youth attending our Sunday services right now. I feel like when we can open up again in a consistent way, we need to really build some effort into that. We have a few families, and I know Lynn could speak to this. We have a few really solid families, and that's maybe a good place to start. And a while ago, didn't Jeff initiate OWL with other churches? And I think, you know, maybe we expand the net, that toss a wider net. But I agree with you. I really adore our program, and our kids are solid, man. They are communicative. They're well adjusted. They've got lifelong friends that came out of the con system in the UU world. I'm a huge advocate.
I'm just thinking like with your
Friend circle
dancing,
from
you
the
know.
cons. I don't know if she's kept up with them.
Okay, I'm sorry, Jim, you were finishing.
Oh, I was just saying like with your dancing, for
James
example,
didn't like them
with,
at all.
you know, some
Hey,
of
I'm
the
sorry, I can't hear Jim because somebody needs to mute. Maybe Margaret and Tom are chatting. Go ahead, Jim.
Oh, I'm just thinking like in terms of some of your kind of talents and experiences, like with dancing, for example, and, you know, I mean, I could see young people, you know, getting into that.
I like the idea of infusing more playfulness also into Sunday mornings.
Yeah.
At the WA meeting, I will confess, at the WA meeting the other day, I was blowing bubbles at my camera. Just
Kim, I just noticed that the chat was disabled, which is why we're not getting offers of questions through the chat box. Can we do anything about that?
well, I see Ted has his hand up.
Yeah, let's do that. I didn't disable the chat, so.
We're not that big of a group, so.
All right, let's go with the hands up.
Okay, so Acosta, I missed where you were born, what state or city,
Oh.
and the name of both schools, and I missed what Forrest is doing, and I missed you talking about what your mom's career was.
Well, okay, I didn't even mention that there was going to be a quiz at the end of the hour. You are really on it. Okay, so let me see if I got it right. I was born in Greeley, Colorado. I didn't mention that. When I was like 2, my family moved back to the Chicago area, and my dad went into practice with his dad, both obstetricians, OB-GYN. The old-fashioned kind where the phone was ringing at the middle of the night, or over the dinner table, dad was giving advice like, how many centimeters is she? It was often disgusting. And then when my brother was in medical school and then came home on Sundays to do laundry and eat and talk shop with my dad, it was just medical people. We love them, but maybe not as dining partners. So your other question, Forrest, so B is in Memphis doing an interesting R&D lab job, living with her boyfriend who is a blacksmith artist in residence at the Metal Museum. And when his gig ends in June, they will not be staying in all likelihood. Memphis isn't their cup of tea, but they have been going to the UU church there a little bit. She has. Forrest is here at home. Did you hear that? Okay, do that again. Hello. Okay, he's in the background saying hello. He's in his last year at UC Santa Cruz, which is remote. And he will be graduating either this winter or spring quarter. It kind of depends on how the classes land. And he's wonderful and charming. And I'm sorry, Ted, what else? What did I miss?
Your mom's career.
My mother was a homemaker. She was full-time taking care of her 4 children. And then as they began to fly the coop, and I was the last one there, she started working to run the books and the reception at my dad's office at his medical practice. She was very focused on taking care of us because, as is not a private thing, I grew up, now we know that it's called a codependent alcoholic home. But in the 60s, the research was being done on families like mine. So now we have the lexicon, but that's what I grew up with. So my mother was very focused on taking care of the family, keeping us together. She was 100% always there for us and made that her focus to protect the family.
Yes.
But where was the alcohol problem?
My dad.
Oh, okay, my dad too.
Yeah.
And church helped us. Did church help your family?
They're very dedicated to church, although their mobility prevents them from going. But my dad goes to AA meetings a lot. It's been more than once a week for many years. Now that they're kind of in lockdown, it's harder. But he's still been really active going to AA meetings. And I can say that out loud because he'd be happy to let you know that in case you needed someone to talk to. I've scolded him many times about the anonymous part. And this is where the conversation has gone. So I see Kathy waving.
I have a really silly question, but I'm new enough in the church. What is walk?
WA is the worship associate.
Oh, WA. I thought you said walk, W-O-K, and I was trying to figure out. Oh,
I
thank
see
you.
Carol. Sure, Kathy. I see Carol.
Well, I have two questions. One, I think I know something about the Northwestern Archaeology School, and I wondered how you happened to go to archaeology school. It sounded like even in high school, or maybe as an undergrad. And then when did belly dancing come into your life? Because I think of archaeology school, and that sort of explains being in Mexico, but where did the belly dancing come in?
Interesting, the archaeology had nothing to do with Mexico, ultimately. The archaeology school was because I was a big nerd and I really we traveled in the Southwest. We visited many Native American sites. What's the one in Colorado with the cliff builders? Mesa Verde, Canyon de Chelly. Like I said, finding unmarked sites in the bottom of the Grand Canyon on those trips. So I was really, really into it. And American archaeology, not like Egyptian archaeology. So I don't remember exactly how I found it, but it was a high school program. And it was 6 weeks at a time. So 2 summers in high school, I was down in Campsville with a K, Illinois. And I would go to the public phone on the corner of this little tiny dirty town. And I would call, you know how we used to call collect? And I would call collect, you know, placing a call from Dr. Leakey and stuff like that. But so that was, and that got me, the first summer in college, I actually did get paid. I was a pit bum. I was working for the Illinois State Museum, sinking pits for contract archaeology and rescue sites in Southern Illinois, which was brutal, brutal, brutal work, really hard labor. And then belly dance, when we were early in San Francisco, we came up to San Francisco in '84 after our 365 days in LA. And I was tired of being poor, working in educational travel, which was my gig out of LA. I was traveling into Mexico for the educational tours and staying in family homes, but the pay is really squat. I think I got a big $1,100 a month and we were thrilled. And so we came up to San Francisco and I was tired of being poor. So I got a job in investment securities, if you can possibly fathom that. And so I was learning about regulation with a broker dealer and really hating it, but the money was good. And I'm like, there must be something better in life, maybe yoga. So this was before the internet. So I started calling like yoga studios from the yellow pages. And one of them also had belly dance. And I'm like, wow, I never even thought of that. It didn't even occur to me that you would take a lesson in that. So I went and one night I fell in love. Nobody believed it was my first night belly dancing. And I don't know, maybe they were just trying to sell some classes, but it worked. And it was so fabulous. I found myself, I do move well. I am a good dancer. But there's a big story behind that of body image and unhealthy body image. And my mother thought she was helping by telling us we were fat, and nobody loves a fat girl because you can't bag a doctor if you're fat, but she thought she was helping. So my sisters and I'm the youngest, I had the least of that. But I was dancing for a solid 10 years before I thought, hey, I'm showing my stomach, like boing, you know how epiphanies are, right? After you have it, it's so obvious, it's almost embarrassing. So I've actually danced for my dad and his minister when they were out here in Berkeley getting a Stevens ministry training once, because they came to that one regular gig I was talking about before. And I've danced for my family in my sister's house. And on my big finale, I have finger cymbals, which are brass. Like they're hard. It was the first time I'd ever danced with for my family. So I'm in my sister's house and I finished with this big finale and my finger cymbal takes out a piece of the chandelier. The broken glass is showering down behind me. I died. I was so embarrassed. I ran away crying. At the time I came out, my brother-in-law fixed it. But There's another really funny belly dance. I mean, I've had my bra open. I've had my underpants showing. Oh my God. I danced in up in Alaska where I was working a lot at the Pratt Museum several times a year for quite a few years. I always ended up there over solstice. And they had a forest behind the museum where artists would come do art installations at the beginning of every winter or of every summer. And they would have this big summer solstice. And up there, it's not above the Arctic Circle. So the sun does kind of dip down below the edge for a couple hours, but then it goes around the sky. So you can read at 2 in the morning like nobody's business. So anyway, I did a dance. I was barefoot in the forest, doing a belly dance for the opening of their outdoor forest gallery on summer solstice. And it went really well. And then I went to leave the area and my toe caught in my hair and pants and I went down so hard in the mud on my hands and knees. And what are you gonna do? You know, you've got all this adrenaline from performing. So I just like point right up as fast as I could. I'm like, anything can happen on solstice in the forest. And then I ran away.
My goodness. Are there any other questions?
I see Joyce with a question.
Yes, go
Hi,
Karen.
Joyce.
Yes,
Joyce.
Wendy, I'd like to hear about that screen that's behind you.
Joyce, by the way, was one of my students, you should know. One of my dance students. She can shimmy, I'm telling you. These are just screens we bought a long time ago. They're nothing special. I mean, I like them a lot. But
Yeah, I do too. Yeah.
thanks. I don't, on the big sliding glass door, I don't have curtains or shades. I just put those up if we need to block it. And then Ray usually has one of these in B's room because that's his office now. So he puts it behind him for Zoom meetings because we're both working full time from home now.
Very attractive.
Thank you.
Jim has another question.
Yeah, I can't wait, you know, as a WA, I can't wait to see you telling stories and dancing and moving. I think you're just a wonderful storyteller. So.
Oh, thank you so much. You know, it's a point that I made a couple notes because there's so many things I wanted to share. But you know that TEDx thing and then the Western Museum one with the belly dance? I am a good presenter in some ways, but the TEDx venue is not my strong point. I learn, you know, you live and learn. I was really eager. I over-rehearse and it takes it's tricky. It's a tricky balance, but I feel good about the storytelling with you guys and at church and stuff. It's a different kind of venue and a different kind of sharing. And thank you. I'm excited to do it. Lorraine.
Yes, I'm just thinking about, I think the first time I met you, Ray, it was at Yvonne and Joe's crawdad feed. Remember that?
Yes, ages ago.
Yes.
That was fun. I see Kathy again.
Well, it was just very quickly when you said the Big Bang. I named my daughter after the guy who just won the Nobel Prize for coining the Big Bang, Jim Peebles. And I'm going to tell him your story about how you did the.
Oh, we
Big
had
Bang,
so much
I
fun.
talked to him a lot. It was
Oh,
in
good.
Princeton. He just won the Nobel Prize this year for the Big Bang.
Hey, I hadn't heard that.
Yes.
Oh,
Questions?
Doug is waving his arm back here. Can Doug ask a question?
What do you got, Doug?
So do you still pursue or read anthropology or American anthropology?
Not broadly, no. In the context of like a museum project, I'll pick up content when I need to. But no.
I can see you finding unfound sites in the Grand Canyon. Absolutely.
Yeah, when I'm 8 years old.
Yes.
Rolling around in the sand to get warm, yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. It was cool. It was cool. Our parents, you know, they really exposed us to a lot of really wonderful
You're lucky.
opportunities. Very lucky. And we've traveled our kids some, but not as much as I was traveled. And I feel sorry that we haven't done more with them. But they've done a little on their own. So we took them to the UK in 2010, and we've traveled a fair amount on the West Coast, in the West broadly. And then B did a semester in Scotland in 2016. And then this past winter, Forrest was in Chile.
Oh, nice.
And he was hiking. He was hardcore backpacking among the mountains and volcanoes.
Oh.
He's built for that.
Wow.
I would be remiss if I did not remind everyone about the current survey that we need you to do.
Yeah, she did it.
Oh,
She wrote it.
When I last checked this afternoon, I had only 34 responses, and I want you to know that in qualitative research, a minimum of 60 is really where we like to be. But there's also quantitative stuff in there, so the more the better, because we're trying to find out, take the temperature of folks about coming back in person and that sort of thing, which I think you know the leadership has decided not to do that before January.
Yeah.
With
Yeah,
no set date, just not during the calendar year.
Would you like to?
Is it a link in the newsletter?
The link went out in an email on Sunday right after service, but I have it open here, so hang on.
Special
Send
announcement.
it out again.
It's in the newsletter today.
Oh, it is? Okay, good, because I realized I shut everything down so I wouldn't have too much open while I was dealing with you guys. So yeah, check the note that went out today. It's fun. I do good surveys. You guys will have fun.
Well, I was going to say, as one who has used surveys, I was very impressed with your survey. And
Oh, thank you.
did you have training in surveys?
This is what I do at the Y most. Right now I do surveys more than anything. In my consulting practice in the museum world, I have a much bigger toolkit than that. I really like one-on-one interviews. I like group interviews, what we call focus groups. I like other kinds of tools. I really like to use concept mapping and journey mapping. I'm doing actually a big journey mapping study at the YMCA of the staff experience because of the reorganization. I'm hoping to get some play for that nationally.
Nice.
So I do tons of survey work now, and for you guys, of course. And then when I was helping with the mission statement a year ago, that really just turned into a big qualitative research project. So it was a lot of focus group type of data and process.
You were fabulous helping us with that.
Carol, thank you. It was so wonderful to work with you on that.
Right, but being able to figure out how to ask the questions and pull the data together with ease, I've done just enough survey work to know how terrible it can be or how complicated it can get. And you made it fun in a lot of ways and useful. And so that was great. And you've helped in small ways at other times in the congregation doing that. So that ability to take a whole lot of opinionated people's opinions and get them organized in a way that people will all find interesting, that's a gift.
Yeah, thank you. I'm super happy to be able to help. And it's funny. I am a really opinionated person, and I'm an extrovert, but I feel very comfortable checking out and letting the data do this talking. And I have a very transparent practice because I want people to understand how I came to the conclusions that I did. Yeah.
That's why we know the mission statement now.
Look forward.
It makes my heart go pitty pat every time they start off a service with the mission statement.
I look forward to the results coming up soon.
Me too. It's always nice to see who won.
Thank you very much, Wendy.
Thank you,
so much
Nani.
for the sharing and full of interesting ideas and open and thorough. And thank you for the very thorough handling of difficult questions.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure.
For the future, we have Ann Carden and John Eller, who are